Hi there, my name is Marley and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be filming my July wrap up. I'm filming this a little bit quickly. I'm a little flustered, just got back from a trip from Vegas and then I'm off to a cottage, like another vacation, but I just wanted to quickly film this video. Hopefully I can remember a little bit about all these books and give you guys some reviews. So as always, I'm going to talk about these books from my least favorite to my most favorite, and a few of these books I have read in vlogs on my channel, so I'll definitely reference those if you want to go and watch those vlogs. And I actually ended up reading 9 books this month, so pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Because I'm rushed, I'm not going to go through any stats in this video, so let's just hop into the first book, which was my least favorite book of the month, and that was We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han. This is the 3rd book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series. I read this for a video where I read the oldest books on my TBR. This is a little bit of an older book, but it's been made popular again by the Summer I Turned Pretty TV show, which I really loved, but unfortunately this book did not deliver. This series follows a teenage girl named Belly. It's like a coming of age story where we see a lot of her time at this summer house that she spends with her family and another family, and she ends up getting in a love triangle with 2 brothers. There's also family dynamics and, as I said, like coming of age themes as well. The first 2 books were pretty good. It's pretty enjoyable. There's some emotional parts, but a lot of it is mostly like a pretty fun YA series. Unfortunately, in this 3rd book, it really made me dislike most of the characters, even ones that I was liking in previous books. It just really showed how immature these characters were. I feel like Jenny Han really wanted like some big dramatic thing to go on, but it just made me dislike the characters, and I feel like the ending got a little bit rushed for the main couple that ends up together, the endgame couple. I don't want to say who it is, but I just don't like the way that it was done. So I give this one 2.5 stars. Another book I gave 2.5 stars to was I'm the Girl by Courtney Summers. This was actually an ARC that I got from NetGalley, so thank you to them and to the publisher. I think it comes out in September. You guys might recognize Courtney Summers from her book Sadie. That is definitely the most popular book from her and the one I see most people talk about, and I actually really did enjoy Sadie. I think I read it last year and I gave it 4 stars. So that's why I requested this ARC. I've been wanting to read more of Courtney Summers books. However, unfortunately, I was obviously disappointed with this, giving it a 2.5 star. If you haven't heard about it, it is about our main character. I'm blanking on her name, of course. I always forget their names. But she's a teenage girl. She's going through some hard times. Like, her mom has recently died, and she's just not happy with her life, and she's not very well off. Like, her family is not doing great financially. Her brother's taking care of her now. She really wants to be like an actress or a model, or be very successful, and she thinks that she can do it. She thinks that she's a very beautiful girl. So she ends up getting these modeling photos done, which end up being a bit of a scam. They ask for a whole bunch of money and then just kind of disappear. And so she decides she wants to work to be able to pay her brother back because she stole money from him to pay for the photos. Anyways, then another thing going on is that she stumbles across this dead girl's body. This is a thriller mystery kind of book. It's very dark. She stumbles across this young girl who has been raped and murdered on the side of the road, and so we have this mystery of who killed this girl. That same person also ran our main character over and stole those model photos she had took. So it's this whole mystery, and then our main character gets a job at this resort hotel place, and there's some ominous vibes at this place as well. That's all I'll say about it, but the reason I rated it so low was due to the graphic content mostly, because I do think the writing was pretty quick to get through, which for me, I always love that if a book has writing that just makes me want to keep reading, not put it down. This book did have that. I read it very quickly. However, I wasn't pleased with what actually happened in the book. This is a YA novel for teens, and I just feel like it got a little bit too graphic for what I think they should be reading. Now, that's obviously my opinion. I just thought it was like too much, and I get that Courtney Summers, clearly her thing is writing very dark books. Like if you've read Sadie, you know, but I feel like in Sadie it was just done in a better way, and I see what she was going for in this book. Like I think a lot of things I didn't like were things she was doing on purpose to get a reaction, but I just wasn't happy with the way things were done. I think certain things didn't need to be that graphic, or she could have written things in a way that the message could come across better than what it was. It was honestly just like really upsetting, like kind of thing where like everything that could go wrong goes wrong for this girl, and I think it was just like too upsetting of a book. You know, I've read disturbing books like, you know, My Dark Vanessa, that was super graphic and super disturbing, yet I still rated it high because it was like a good book, like it did things well. But this was trying to be that, but you ultimately can't make a YA book like that impactful when it's dealing with such hard topics and you don't have the time to really flesh them out. Like this is a relatively short book, so I just don't think it was capable of doing like what I wanted to do, and it took on too many serious topics that they were not done well enough, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if I'll check out more of her books or not. I kind of am interested to read more of them, but just be aware, like this one, like heavy trigger warnings for like a lot of different things. Next up we have The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins. I gave this one 3 stars. It's also featured in that reading blog that I mentioned. This is another YA thriller about these 2 friends who go camping or like hiking for this trip before going away to university, where they're going to be going separate ways. And basically they should not have gone on this trip. Like there's a lot of kind of ominous things going on in the woods, like an abandoned tent. They think they hear things, blah blah blah, and eventually they do end up getting like attacked. And it's kind of, I've never read a book like this, but I've watched a lot of movies where, you know, a group of friends go into the woods and then things start happening, whether it's like supernatural things or like there's a killer in the woods, stuff like that. So if you like those sort of things, you might like this. However, obviously because it is a YA thriller, like it's not the best, but it did actually get better than I thought that it was gonna be. The first half was very, very slow. Second half was way better. It actually got very action-packed. It actually got pretty graphic as well, kind of slashery, I guess. Had a better ending than, you know, I'm the Girl by Courtney Summers. And I actually quite liked the friendship elements, the survival elements, very much a survival story. Unfortunately, I still had to rate it low-ish just because the first half was so slow for me, and I didn't like the narration choice. It kept switching between the girls, and I really could not differentiate between the 2 girls' points of view. And I think she should have maybe like stuck with only one point of view in those moments. But yeah, this is just kind of like a mediocre thriller from Stephanie Perkins again. Okay, next up, I completed the Red Rising series and I read Morning Star by Pierce Brown. This is a young adult sci-fi series, or kind of dystopian vibes, about this guy named Darrow, and he lives on Mars, which is kind of like the lowest of the low in this society. They have like a colored caste system, and then when some very like traumatic things ends up happening, he gets recruited to go undercover as a gold, which is like the highest in this society, to sort of infiltrate them and bring them down from within. It's like the way I normally describe it, but it does take place in space. It really gives me like Ender's Game vibes, Star Wars vibes, if you really like politically charged books, and again, dystopian, like taking down the evil like government kind of thing. I think the first 2 books I gave 4 stars each. It definitely is very like dense and hard to understand a lot of the space terminology. At least for me, I feel like Pierce Brown is not the best at like easily describing things to you. Like you really have to pay close attention. But by the end of the first 2 books, I was always really invested and loving it, and loving the plot twists and a lot of the characters. However, this 3rd book, unfortunately, I did only give 3 stars. I did not enjoy it as much as the other 2 books. I found it very hard to understand at a lot of points. I also felt like there was like new characters being brought in that I couldn't quite grasp who they were, and then I was constantly forgetting about like past characters we'd been introduced to before. But then at the end of the day, like there still were those characters I was invested in. I still was invested in like seeing what was gonna happen. It's very dramatic, and there is something at the end that like really moves you and leaves you on like, I don't know, like an emotional note. However, the amount of space fighting and like spaceship fighting that was going on. Like, that is just not my thing. And so this was really boring me a lot of the time, and I was kind of skimming past a lot of the time, unfortunately. So I don't think I'm going to continue with this world. This was the first trilogy, and I know there's another trilogy that is currently coming out. I don't think I'm going to continue, but I am happy that I read these books. So yeah, definitely if you're into like Star Wars and space and like politics, there's a lot of political stuff, so would definitely recommend for like certain types of people, but not everyone. All right, next up we have Hold My Hand by Michael Barakiva. Again, I read this for that blog that I mentioned of reading the oldest books on my TBR. This is a sequel to One Man Guy, which is a YA contemporary book about this boy named, I can actually check here, named Alec, and he is American Armenian. And because his family is so religious, he is really struggling with his identity as he is gay. So in the first book, he has a romance with this boy named Ethan, and that really helps him figure things out with his sexuality, and the romance was really, really cute. I read the first book like back in high school. So this is the sequel that I guess people begged Michael to write, and he decided to do it years later. Unfortunately, I did not enjoy it as much as the first one, and I did have some issues with it, that the more I've sat with it, like the bigger issues I've had, to the point of like me maybe thinking I should change my rating from a 3.5 to something lower. But I do have to say, I enjoyed this book for the most part. I really, really like Alec's character. I think he's a really sweet boy, and I really enjoy reading about his family, especially in this book. His parents are great, his brother's great, and I really like seeing the Armenian culture. If you are interested in that at all, I really recommend reading this. It comes across as like a very authentic experience. However, the romance between him and Ethan is what was disappointing in this book. I am just gonna say there's cheating involved. At the end, I think it was in the author's note, Michael wrote that people wanted him to write a book about Alec and Ethan breaking up and them getting back together, which I get it. Like, that's a fun story. I like angst in my relationships that I read about too, but I feel like all of us can collectively agree that like cheating is just so annoying, and I feel like it's a cop-out, and it's like you could have come up with a different way for the characters to be fighting and having angst that wasn't just cheating, because it's so hard to get past that. There were still cute moments between them, but I just really do think that that soured it a lot. But it is a very cute YA LGBT book. Again, especially if you want that like Armenian American perspective, and Alec is a very likable character. So next up, we have my 4-star reads. So I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Finally, I got to this one. It's such a popular book, and Matt Haig is a very popular author. And I actually read this for the Buzzwordathon. The challenge was to read a book with like a bookish word in the title, so obviously library fit. I don't even know if I need to describe the plot of this to you, but in case you somehow haven't heard of it, it's about this woman in the UK, and she is very depressed, not happy with her life, obviously, and she attempts to end her life, actually. And then it's this sort of magical realism, I guess, speculative kind of thing, where she ends up in this midnight library. It's full of all these books and stuff of different life paths that she could have done. And so it's almost like a Christmas Carol kind of thing, where she goes and sees what all of these different lives could have been like if she had made different choices, and it just has a lot of like deep messages about like life and stuff like that. I really enjoyed this. It was a quick read. As I said, I gave it 4 stars. I do see what people mean when they say that it's very cheesy. It's true. The messages aren't exactly like new messages. It's very much like life is like a game of chess, or it's very basic like that, but I still enjoyed it, and it really made me reflect on things and like think about my own life and different choices that I could have made. It made me wish that I could go to a midnight library and like experience my life if certain little things would have been done differently. But I think I had a good message, and I think it's definitely worth reading. This was the 2nd book I read this month, so it's not super like fresh in my mind at this point, but I did enjoy it. I think it did start to get a little bit repetitive, I want to say, but I think it was good. I feel like it could be a good movie or something like that too. Yeah, I don't know. Then one of my other favorite books I read this month was Pieces of Her by Karin. She is a thriller author. This is the 3rd book I've read from her now, and I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I've heard a little bit of mixed things from people, which I can understand. It is rather long for a thriller book, so I was definitely worried about that, but I actually found it very quick to get through. I would not let the length of it deter you. It's about our main character, Andrea, and she's kind of struggling struggling with what she wants to do. I think she's like 30 in the book. Used to live in New York, was trying to get into like the theater scene, but ended up coming home when her mom got sick with cancer, and she's just kind of stayed home, and her life is very stagnant now. She doesn't really know what to do next. Anyways, this big violent incident ends up happening that involves her mother, and it makes her realize she has no idea who her mom really is. Like, there's something weird with the mom's past. She's very confused, and it ends up leading to her going on the run kind of thing. And while she's on the run, she's figuring out a bunch of stuff about her mom, and we're also seeing flashbacks to the mom's life when she was younger. It definitely went in directions that I was not expecting. This is not a traditional thriller in terms of it being like about killing and like it being a murder mystery, which are most of the thrillers that I read are like that, right? They're more like domestic thrillers, a murder mystery. This is not really like that. It gets a little bit more political. So I like that because I don't read a ton of books like that. It kind of reminded me of like a Robert Langdon book by Dan Brown, because those are a little bit more politically charged. And again, it's a character that's on the run and there's like a 24-hour deadline, that kind of thing, and this has similar vibes to that. So I think if you like those kind of books, you would like this. I really liked the reveals. I really like how deep we got into the characters of Andrea and then her mom Laura. I think there's actually a second book coming out in this like series, which I have a little bit of mixed feelings on. I feel like this was a pretty conclusive story, but because I liked it so much, I think I might actually check out that other book. But another book that definitely is very upsetting, very graphic, that is kind of what Karin Slaughter is known for. I will say it's probably the least graphic of the books I've read from her. I've read Pretty Girls and The Good Daughter, but as you can expect from her, like, it does still deal with a lot of those serious and very, very upsetting topics. So be aware of that. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good, and I really look forward to watching the Netflix show. Another book I read this month, it was actually the last book that I read, and I read it on my trip to Vegas, so mostly like by the pool and on the plane. That was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, my first Sally Rooney book. And I have to say, I think I am a Sally Rooney girly. I think I am, because obviously I gave this 4 stars. I honestly didn't really know what this one was about going into it. I knew a lot more about Normal People, which is her more popular book, but I have been hearing a little bit more about this book recently. I've seen a lot of people liked it better than Normal People, so we'll have to see, because I haven't read that one yet, but I did quite like this one. It's following a group of friends, but mainly our main character Frances, who is like a 21-year-old college student in Ireland, and she has a best friend who is also her ex-girlfriend, which I did not realize this had queer elements, so in case you didn't know, like, it does. So, and then they end up befriending this kind of like older couple, and follows all the kind of intermingling relationships between mainly the 4 of them. At first I was a little worried, like a lot of the characters come across as unlikable at first. They're very kind of stuck up. They're all like artists and very artsy kind of people, and very like flawed, but as you keep reading, I feel like I actually came to like relate a lot, especially to the main character. I don't know what that says about me, but I do feel like these characters were like very real, which is what I wanted from Sally Rooney, and that's definitely what I got. Like, there were so many good quotes in this book that I was like taking note of, and like interesting, I guess, messages that I was making throughout. I had some like chronic illness rep, which I related to, and I was kind of torn between like, do I love these characters together, do I hate them? Like, it deals with a lot of complex things, and so I quite liked it. I think the ending was a little bit abrupt. Like, I wasn't sure how to feel about that, but I feel like throughout the whole journey of the book, I was really enjoying it. It was a very, very quick read. I didn't find any issues with the no quotation thing, which a lot of people talk about, and I was worried about that, but I found it very easy to understand, and I do look forward to reading the rest of her books. I didn't cry or anything though that I can think of, so I'm wondering, like, Normal People must be a lot more sad, but a lot of people say they have similar messages, so I'm very intrigued to read that one and kind of compare. But yeah, I did like Conversations with Friends, so let me know your thoughts on that if you have read it, and your thoughts on the different Sally Rooney books. Alright, and the last book, and my favorite book of the month, and also the first book I read this month, The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I gave it 5 stars. I did a whole reading vlog for this, but it is spoilery, so maybe don't watch it unless you have read the book. As for my non-spoilery review, here we go. It is about main character Casey, who is an actress who's going through a rough time. Her husband recently died at this a house that's on a lake that her family owns. So she's dealing with that, the grief, and so she's taking a break from acting and just sort of staying at this house, recovering, but not really, because she's just literally drinking constantly. But while she's there, there's a few other houses on this lake, including the one across from her that has this couple living there. It's I think it's a model, and then her husband, who's like a techie guy, and she befriends them. But then eventually the wife, the model, ends up going missing, and the husband is being pretty suspicious, and she is kind of trying to prove that the husband killed her, or she's trying to figure out like what happened to this woman that she had befriended. There's a few other people on the lake that are kind of like suspicious that she's interacting with, and there's also some paranormal vibes for sure. I, as always, really enjoyed it. Obviously, I feel like it's one of my favorite Riley Sager books. It's very similar to Home Before Dark, which is my favorite of his, because it does have that paranormal stuff going on. I really enjoy Riley Sager's writing style. That is always, I think, my favorite part. I've said before, I really like when a book is just super quick and easy to get through. I really enjoy that, and so this was definitely like that. I know some people said it was slow in the beginning, but I don't really think so. I literally binged it in like a day, so clearly I was not struggling with that. I will admit some of the reveals I did see coming. I thought they were a little obvious, but then there were some that I really was not expecting. It went to a place I really did not think it would, based on, you know, when I first opened this book. I see why some people wouldn't like the main kind of twist to it, but as I said, I just really did. I feel like it's different from his other books and different from a lot of books that I have read. I just always love when a book keeps me guessing, and then it also had a lot of like action, kind of like survival stuff at the end as well, which is always good. Again, I read it my first book of the month, and I read it in a day, so I feel like not a ton of it is sticking with me now, but I do just remember having such a good time reading it, and I highly recommend it. But obviously I'm in the minority. A lot of people are rating this low and saying it's one of his worst books. So I don't know who you want to believe. If you like paranormal stuff, I would say check it out. An unreliable narrator. And if you're okay with some twists being predictable and some not, but you're just like there for the ride, like almost like with Ruth Ware too, who just has such excellent vibes and writing in my opinion, but then like, you know, the twist is sometimes pretty predictable. It's kind of like that, but I still enjoy books like that. Again, 5 stars, favorite book of the month, one of my favorites of the year. That's it. So that's my wrap up, my quick little wrap up here. Let me know in the comments if you have thoughts on any of these books, and make sure to subscribe and follow me on Goodreads and Storygraph, which are linked below. I will see you in my next video. Hope you have a great rest of the summer. Bye.